Om Shanti. Welcome to this session of interview with the Raj Yogi. And our topic is freedom in action. So as usual, before we explore that topic, we'll take a moment to reflect. Every second of the day, I, the soul, am acting through this body. From very subtle, invisible activity to very gross, overt activity, from thoughts to deeds. The day is filled with countless choices. What action will I perform in this moment? What attitude will I hold? What vision? What words will I speak or not speak? What deeds? And I know at every moment, in every act, there are two basic choices I face, like a fork in a road. One choice is to act under the influence of all that is not me. Ego, insecurity, fear, greed. And the other choice is to act in alignment with my true nature. Very peaceful, very light, very content. At every moment during the day, this is the choice I face in every action. In the beginning, it was very natural to act aligned with my true nature. But over time, I lost that power. The essence of the spiritual journey is to regain that power. If I am connected to the truth, to God, as I perform action, I start to build the power to act in alignment with my true nature until it becomes natural again. Om Shanti. Om Shanti. So welcome again to those who joined with us this evening. Again, the topic is freedom in action. For myself, the reason why I chose this topic was actually thinking about, there's a phrase that's used in Raja Yoga, and I think it's used in perhaps many other physical yogas, karma yoga. And this word, this phrase, before we go into it, I was thinking so much about self-mastery. And I know that this aspect of being able to be real in action is something that matters a lot to you. So, and I really was just inspired. We had a very powerful student, very committed student in this study came to visit, and was inspired always to hear their experiences or just experiences of students. And so was thinking more about those types of questions to direct them towards you. What has your experience been like in terms of what what things have been like before you came to the study? Because you used to do a lot of ballet, a lot of dancing, and what contrast have you felt being in this study?
Contrast between
Your experience of just movement, just actions. You know, everyone looks at ballet and has certain ideas, but what were you looking for that resonate with you with Raj Yoga? And did you find there was a huge contrast when you came into the study because you're still being asked to dance, but just movement in general?
I think that there perhaps is movement can be a metaphor. Dance or movement can be a metaphor for what one is trying to achieve on the spiritual path. The idea is that we have the term Jiva Mukti, which means liberation in life or freedom in action, and that's happiness. So I think the study I felt there was a lacking of realness in my activity, that there was a lot of reactivity, but not really a lot of responding from my true nature. And that became very clear and understandable once coming into the study. And then, of course, there's the metaphor in dance that in dance, one is really taught to develop very good alignment and to preserve that alignment as one comes into action. So when we hear the word freedom in action, it may seem like you're just letting everything go. But actually, it's only when there's a very strong core that the movement is truly free.
What could you clarify a bit more? Because some might look at it and just do whatever I want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's the same as freedom of rights or anything. It takes remarkable discipline, actually, to really be free, doing whatever I want. I'm not sure if that state really exists. We can be under the influence of things like ego and desire and greed and etc. And they are actually inspiring our activity. So we're not really free. So I actually need a very strong spiritual core, a lot of strength to move freely. And definitely this happens in dance, that we see souls who seem to be moving in a very fluid and free and flowing way and don't realize the amount of strength required to do that.
With that parallel, just using the physical, if they don't have that core, but they're sort of trying to move freely, what happens?
Well, the worst injury happens. But at the best, we're not actually able, I mean, we use the word directions in spirituality. In movement, it would be choreography. We're not actually able to honor the choreography.
It's interesting that you need to have a certain eye to be able to sense them.
Yeah, I've noticed that I will watch souls, and I think it's this almost sense of the inner and the outer, that the feeling of I'll make bigger movements, kick higher legs, whatever. And so you see that happening on the surface, but you also see that this is happening by compromising alignment. So it looks impressive, but it actually is at a price.
What is your experience like then? when you've come into the study of just practicing being aware of your soul, and in the commentary, you're sharing about having a choice to actually respond in a different way.
I think that the very uplifting and hopeful vision of Raj Yoga is that it's not trying to fight against some sort of primal instinct, but we're actually returning to our natural original state. So this idea that, and we actually see this again as a metaphor, that any injuries aside, infants naturally move properly. And then we sort of develop bad habits in our movement or our mechanics. And spirituality suggests the same, that our original state is very aligned with the dignity of the human spirit. And we move away from that as we lose power. And so we have to start to pay attention. I'd say that's the biggest thing, attention. Our seated times is for accumulating power, but then we have to pay attention to sustain that source of power as we come into action. So it's a lot of paying attention.
What is your experience like? What's happening internally? This paying attention, what does that look like inside? What does it feel like?
So if someone in movement has developed, again, these are acquired, a misaligned movement mechanic, so they're moving the body in a way that is not really beneficial, they have to go into what we call almost an artificial state, as close to zero gravity. So maybe lie them down, just removing gravity as much as possible so that they can feel again what the proper alignment is. The moment we start to fight gravity, we sort of move back into that strange alignment. So we take them into zero alignment, and whether it's lying down or putting them in water or whatever, so that they can be placed back in the proper alignment and feel what that's like. And then, of course, the big, big transition is, can they hold that now that they know what it feels like? Can they stand upright and sustain that as they come into movement? The same applies in spirituality. We have seated meditation, which is quite artificial. We have seated meditation, but the idea is to go into zero gravity. Don't do anything. Do as little as possible. You're just seated and have a chance to feel through connection to Supreme Soul, through connection to a soul that is always properly aligned. That soul, that connection helps me to feel reminds me of my true alignment, what it means to be in that naturally pure state. It reminds me that I feel it, experience it. I know what it feels like. When I'm in yoga, I feel real when I'm connected to that source of truth. So I want to know what it feels like. That's step one. Then the big, big shift. Can I hold that feeling as I come into action, which means I have to have the link, because the Supreme Soul is like a brace keeping me in alignment. So I want that link. That's why I need attention, because again, I can feel, and we say Om Shanti, that's the feeling of my true alignment. I'm very peaceful no matter what's going on. And then I have that feeling, I know what it's like. So I want to pay attention that feeling is there as I come into action.
What has your journey been like then? I'm just using the example of fitness because that's as an instructor, that's a pretty high pressured situation. And where you're the instructor in the room, and what has your journey been like since you started Raja Yoga in terms of being free while you're in that situation? Because one of the biggest things is, in terms of what can get in the way, the noise is the image. While you share, I'm going to have to adjust the plug on this phone before it dies. Go ahead.
So, um, in that particular context, when we say image, what that means is that ego becomes very active. And so this is just an example, a sign of being free of ego. Ego likes to plan, control, all of these things. So one of the things I experiment as an example, one of the qualities when the soul is properly aligned is spontaneity, because there's no ego. So to go into a situation and just do improv, just not be planning.
Do you let yourself be in those situations deliberately?
I have been, yes, I have been. Drama has been forcing that. I often don't have time to plan, but I kind of enjoy experimenting with that to see what it's like to be free, to trust, not being influenced by ego. That's just an example.
Do you find it's easier every time?
I find it's a constant journey. There's definitely some scenarios where it's still very interesting, because there is some responsibility to plan at times, but I definitely feel that it's a wonderful opportunity to experiment in a very concrete way, to experiment with what is that spirituality like in action in that particular scenario where ego can be very loud.
Can you describe, a time when you felt that freedom, when ego could be very loud, and what that feels like inside, what that freedom feels like? So I think many can't imagine that there could be this internal tension, ego, or whatever it is, and yet still actually feel yourself in the midst of that.
One of the other words we use for freedom is detachment. So we sort of say ego is there. As it turns out, ego isn't holding on to us. We are holding on to ego. So the more that we're again in that zero gravity situation in yoga, cultivating self-respect, the more power we are accumulating to let go of ego. So this detachment automatically begins to emerge love. Those two are companions. So what it feels like is more love and less ego.
So you've had moments of feeling.
Mm-hmm. It really, if I make mistakes, whatever, and it's not just love for the participants in the class, there's of course that feeling, but also love for the self. It's this freedom is connected deeply to this power of love.
Who would think that, when there's freedom, that you'd be able to love?
Because it is detachment, it is creating space for the natural nature of the soul, which is benevolence, to emerge.
Do you feel that that is why that it's not really the issue? For example, some, they get a new job. This is just an example, and they love their work, but after a while, they just want to quit their job, thinking that that's the problem. But this love you're talking about, and perhaps maybe what has spawned that what they love is not coming from the right place.
Yes, and I perhaps over time, we just start to develop more attachments, more all the things that actually kill love. So, this is the issue about sustenance, sustaining something that we start. As in the beginning, we're very excited, lots of energy. There's what we call a honeymoon period. And then all of these different tensions start to move in, which we call vices, but tension starts to move in. The honeymoon's over. And now, how do I sustain that freedom I felt at the beginning? How do I sustain that? Suddenly, all of these attachments and concerns and worries move in, which drains the soul. And whether you say sustain or love, those are two words that are used often interchangeably. As sort of killing the love So I'm not able to sustain that enthusiasm of the beginning. The souls who really were here from the beginning of the Brahma Kumaris, the establishment, I'm always amazed at how their energies of enthusiasm and love and lightness were sustained over a long period of time, because they were very attentive to not let these other tensions come in.
When you were sharing that you're using the example of physical fitness and proper alignment and seated, having a seated experience of myself, so the parallel, the physical, the spiritual, having a seated experience of myself as a soul, using physical fitness, do you feel that when you were doing ballet or any of the types of movement you were doing, that when you were practicing alignment, that you knew that when you were not properly aligned? And the reason why I ask, because in spirituality, to be seated and to know that your experience is something that's going to carry over, because that's the issue. So can we gauge that? Do you feel you can gauge that in physical movement? That there's such a parallel that you can do that as well in spirituality?
When I took ballet, it was back in the Stone Age, when there was not so much concern about hands-on adjustment. I don't know, things have changed in the world, but the ballet teachers would literally physically move our bodies into alignment. And they did that so that we could feel exactly what was accurate. We could feel it. Now, perhaps they just cue more because hands-on isn't allowed as much, but it was really helpful. And I think sometimes this feeling as well in spirituality, like, am I actually in the right alignment? We have words. Consider yourself to be a soul, you're a point. I think in the beginning, it was the equivalent of hands-on, in that they had drills and very powerful presence of many souls who were in proper alignment. And this really helped to move on everyone so they knew they were feeling the right thing. That may not be as present now. So that's the first thing, is to make sure, am I really soul am I really in the experience of soul accurately when I'm seated? And once I feel that, I think then it's a case of, imprinting that feeling and then bringing it into action. That's the freedom.
Do you feel it's a combination of the significance of that, of being a soul, but also the feeling of being a soul, that both have to be there?
If I am properly aligned, the significance would emerge.
It's because the reason why do we mix those up? It's kind of like, I'm really excited. I got into medical school, but then I actually still have to do the work and study to be a doctor.
I think that maybe we might become intellectual about it. That we're supposed to feel this. This is what it's supposed to mean. But I guess the idea is that if I really went there, someone wouldn't have to tell me that this is what you're supposed to, this is what it means. I would sort of just get there naturally if I was really in the right place. Someone wouldn't have to come along and say, being a soul means that nothing here is yours. You would just feel that without having to be told. So I think, it's almost a kinesthetic thing we want when we say we go into the experience of being a soul. And then almost from the heart, not just as repeating it like a parrot to its points, but from the heart, the significance would emerge. The world is dead to me, etc. All of these would just emerge from the heart.
Have you felt for yourself this very clear relationship between just practicing soul consciousness? It feels like a drill, just like in scales in piano and all the different positions in ballet. Have you felt that translation between your practice of soul consciousness and this freedom in actions internal dynamic to actually, whatever opposition you're feeling on the outside and inside, that there is that capacity to have that space for you to actually do something different than the old way of how we respond to things.
I do. I think, the feeling that when soul conscious, the soul, I'm really freed. It's what am I trying to be freed from, I guess, but I really feel that freedom from ego, from fear, from the past. Like I'm freed from those things and able to act. And I think the actions then become far greater than we can ever conceive or plan. And that's the reason I enjoy the spontaneity. I literally will go into a fitness class with no idea. The only idea I have, because they're going to ask me, is what equipment they should grab. I don't know what we're going to do with it, but I just say, grab this and that. And then there's nothing going on in my head. But then it starts, and I'm always amazed at what comes out. And I know that wouldn't have come out if I had planned it.
Mm-hmm.
So we actually have an incredible capacity inside that is blocked because we're not freed from these tensions.
I was really reflecting on that today. Just, how that it would feel like there's a natural relationship between the significance of that I am soul and what I'm feeling. That perhaps maybe previous births we have habits of, okay, just practice something and you just sort of do it in routine. You're not really going deep. It's just something you do, like it's something that's on the side, and then there's just reality, so to speak.
The whole point of spirituality is not to be something in isolation, but a way of life, a way of living. So that is a huge part of the significance. Is as I go into a spiritual practice, why am I doing this? Mm-hmm. Is to enhance the quality of my activity in my life.
Thank you for sharing. I really feel that it's just illuminating just how important soul consciousness is. I think that we are always trying to be free, perhaps maybe not in ways that are sustainable.
I think, we didn't go there a lot here, but there's God consciousness as well that goes with soul consciousness and very essential for that freedom and action too.
Perhaps that's a part of having someone who's actually, as you're saying, who's always still in that posture. Mm-hmm. Well, that may have to be another session because that's a really deep topic too. Mm-hmm. So perhaps we'll have a reflection.
There is a memory inside, I could say in the heart or the conscience, a memory of my highest potential, a memory of pure action. And that memory is always there, whether or not I acknowledge it. And as I perform actions during the day, that memory is observing how close I am to honoring the heart, honoring the conscience. And this determines whether or not the soul is happy. We say, look in the mirror of the heart. When I am very quiet, in seated reflection, letting go of everything just to experience myself, the soul, this quiet being inside the body. I'm seated here, behind the forehead. When I release into that experience, I automatically gain access as well to the memory in the heart. This really inspires me to honor that memory, to develop the freedom through a connection to the Supreme Soul, to honor the memory in my own heart, my highest potential. Om Shanti.
Shanti. Thank you for those who joined with us. As always, we're always checking the chat box if you have questions about or topics that you'd like to explore. But in terms of upcoming sessions, we always encourage practicing Raja Yoga, practicing soul consciousness. So experience in the evenings on Tuesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, and Sundays, 6:30 to 7:30 on the Brahma Kumari's Calgary YouTube channel. We also have on-site in English as well at the Northeast Center on Fridays, 6:30 to 7:30. We also want to remind souls that we have our first public program, an actual physical public program on site. The venue is still being confirmed. The save date for August 14th, 6:30 to 8:30, and we hope to have details soon. Post on the website as well as through email as well. So please feel free to visit the website for other upcoming sessions. Thank you for joining.